My name is Thayer. I am the second oldest in a family of 7 children. My father built water towers, therefore we moved every 6 weeks. We had a little mobile home that he pulled behind the truck, so our best friends were our siblings. When I was in junior high, my father was diagnosed with cancer, so we moved to Upper Michigan, where both my parents were from. During my junior year of high school, my father passed away, and most of the household responsibilities fell upon me as my mother went into a deep depression. I had been dating somebody since my junior year in high school, and as soon as I graduated in 1970, we got married. And he was in the Air Force, so we immediately moved to Mississippi, where he was stationed. The physical and mental abuse in our relationship started almost immediately. I was not a Christian. I really didn't have a support system. I was living thousands of miles from home, and I was embarrassed to say that anything happened because neither one of our parents had wanted us to get married. Things had changed a lot. We had not seen each other for 6 months before we got married. He had left for basic training, and I was still in high school. He was exposed to a whole lot more of the world once he left and was in basic training. And when he came back, he was a different person. And my gut feeling was I should not be getting married. I knew that on my wedding day I should not get married. However, we had made all the plans and all the expenses, and my mother really didn't have the money for this wedding to begin with. She was a widow, 36 years old, with 7 children at home. And I just went through with it, although my gut feeling was I shouldn't go through with this. And once I was in it, I was too embarrassed. There's a stigma about abuse in a marriage that women don't want to admit. They don't feel they can tell other people, but you need to be able to tell people. You need to be able to go to your pastor and talk about it. You need to stand up for yourself and say, this is not acceptable. Maybe if I'd have been a Christian, things would have been different, but I don't know because I wasn't a Christian at the time, so I just muddled through the best I could with the circumstances that I had. 13 months later, our daughter was born, and we had moved from Mississippi to Texas at that time, so I was quite alienated from my family, and of course, I was not going to say anything to anyone about what was going on in my relationship. Well, then my husband got orders for the Philippines, so I moved back to Michigan and got an apartment, and he headed over to the Philippines for a year. While he was gone, our second daughter was born. During that year that he was gone, I got just a couple letters from him and one phone call when my daughter was born. When he came home in November of '73, he was discharged from the Air Force at that time, and our kids were then 2 and 6 months old, and the drinking and the abuse continued. It's very difficult living in a home with fear because you never know exactly what will set them off. I just remember one situation when I was 8.5 months pregnant with our first child, and it was so hot, and we were sitting at a baseball game and on bleachers with no backs, and I wanted to go home. My back was hurting, it was hot, it was July, we were in Austin, Texas, and he wanted to stay for another game. He said, if you want to go home, go ahead and walk. So I did. I walked the 1.5 miles home, and he continued to stay, and when he came home that night, he was extremely agitated because I had left him. It was an embarrassment to him because I wouldn't stay with him. And there was a lot of physical abuse that night, which started me into early labor, but there was always the fear of what is going to happen, what am I going to say that might set him off, what am I going to do? So it was just a constant fear, constant cutting down until you yourself feel that you're really not worth anything because you've been told it and you've been treated like that for so long. 2 years later, our son was born, and the abuse and both verbal and mental continued. So shortly after our 12th wedding anniversary, I did file for divorce and I moved out. But just prior to that, I had started nursing school. I had decided that if I was going to be on my own, I would need to be able to support my children and myself. So I started nursing school, and thankfully I was able to get lots of scholarships and grants. So I had no bills when I graduated from school, and I ended up with a job in Newberry, Michigan. I also met someone while I was in nursing school, and we moved in together, and he had a son. And I went from one bad relationship to another bad relationship. Once we were living together, I realized he drank every night, and he was also doing drugs. Shortly after I got this job in Michigan, in Newberry, I was able to get a job at the state psychiatric hospital. And I continued in that bad relationship and moved out a couple times, moved back in a couple times. And in the summer of '92, I believe it was, I just had decided that life was not worth living anymore. So I had been taking some antidepressants, and my male friend had all kinds of drugs around the house. So I just decided to go to bed early one night, and I took all my antidepressants and all the Valium he had. And I don't really remember what happened after that. I know I fell asleep, and the next thing I remember is a week later waking up in a hospital in Marquette. And of course, my family was all around me at that time, and the doctors had told them that it would be nearly 100% that I would have brain damage and would be non-functional if I was off the respirator. They decided to take me off the respirator, and to the doctor's amazement, there was absolutely nothing wrong with me. My first thought when I woke up was, I am a loser. I can't even kill myself correctly. My intent was not to ever wake up, and here I am awake in this hospital. And it just kind of reiterated everything that my husband had told me and this other gentleman had told me, that I really was useless. I could not do anything right. Well, the Lord loves everyone, and He has a purpose for everyone. So if He has a purpose for you, you therefore cannot be useless, because He has something He wants you to do in this life. You know, whether it's just to be a janitor, whether it's to pick up garbage, He has a purpose for you. And you can always be a testimony to somebody else, no matter what you do, no matter where you're at. You can let them know that the Lord loves them and that they could have eternal life. I found out later that the doctors had told them that I would probably not survive. I was on life support, and if I did survive, I would most likely be a vegetable. So they had to make that decision whether to take me off life support or just to let things go as they were. And they did choose to take me off life support, and amazingly, there was no brain damage. There was nothing. I decided then that I could not stay in this relationship. However, my oldest daughter was getting married in a couple months, so I didn't want to tell my friend I was moving out for fear of what would happen. So I did move back in, and in October I moved out again and did not move back into that house. I remained living in Newberry, working at the psychiatric hospital. Then the hospital closed. They had been open 100 years, and they closed, and I started applying for jobs, and one of the jobs I applied for was in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I moved to Green Bay and started working at St. Vincent's Hospital, mostly to put distance between us. However, I continued the relationship for about another 6 months, and finally decided that it did need to end. In the meantime, my son had been coming to church here at Bay City Baptist and was involved in the youth group. And through his friends, I met some of their parents who invited me to their house for different outings and were always very friendly. And I remember calling the Shelley Piarkey one evening and asking her if her husband would talk to my son about some issues I was concerned about. And Shelley said, well, could I come over and talk to you? And my first thought was, oh boy, he's doing more than what I thought he was doing. He's in more trouble. He wasn't actually in trouble, but I thought I should have more concerns than I really knew about. But actually, Shelley was coming over to talk to me about the Lord. When Shelley Piarkey came over and talked to me and showed me the plan of salvation, showed me from the Bible how the Lord loves you no matter what you do, and He will forgive you no matter what you do, it was just like this burden had been taken away from me. I didn't have to worry about my past life, about the relationships I had been in, about my suicide attempt, because it was very clear in the Bible that suicide is a sin. I mean, it's murder, whether it's yourself or someone else. And deep down, I knew that. But when Shelley showed me that the Lord loved me no matter what I did, no matter what I'm going to do, it was just like this burden was lifted from me, and you just know that you can go on because the Lord is now there with you, not just some figure somewhere that you can pray to, but He is taking the step with you, and sometimes He is ahead of you, and all you have to do is take the step to Him, and He is always right there for you. And that night in November, I asked the Lord to be my Savior, and I have tried to serve Him faithfully ever since. My daughter was in college at a Baptist college, Christian college, and I called her, and she was so excited. My son was so excited, and I just started serving the Lord. During this time, when I was just starting to go to church, I met my husband, my second husband, who I worked with his sister at a nursing home in Green Bay. And shortly after we met, a year after we met, we got married, and we have been married for 16 years, over 16 years. I know the Lord saved my life for a reason. I didn't know at the time. I was just going day to day, and I knew that He would be showing me what He wanted me for. And He has given us the privilege of raising 4 of our grandchildren, so I know that there was a purpose for me not dying when I made my suicide attempt, and that He has been faithful all along. Life hasn't always been easy. I've had troubles. We've had troubles in our family, but the Lord has always just been there and taken us through each trial and tribulation that we have had. And I just want to continue serving Him.